Thank you for joining me. Today I'll present a visual summary of the 2019 All Saints Financial Report. I'll first show how much revenue we got and how we got it. And then I'll explain how much we spent and how we spent it. Then I'll discuss our investments, and I'll end with a discussion of the 2020 budget. In 2019, All Saints received almost $259,000 worth of revenue. The chart below gives a percentage breakdown by revenue category. Contributions is our largest source, and it makes up 64% of our revenues. Draws from investments is another important source. Draws from investments and contributions make up almost 90% of all our revenues. I'll be discussing the investments later on. The feeding ministries have their own revenue source, and then the additional sources of revenue are facility fees, our fundraising events, such as a pie festival and the resales, and finally we get a small grant from the diocese. In 2019, we spent almost $241,000. And the chart below gives the percentage breakdown by each major expenditure category. Employee and office costs are the greatest percentage, 56%, and this represents not only the payroll, but also everything to keep the office running, from church programs to the computer to the internet, all that. And then programs and outreach are our next largest category. And most of this represents our fair share contribution to the diocese. And then we have buildings and grounds. This is everything from lighting to repair to snow removal. And then the feeding ministries have their own purchases, and then we have miscellaneous other expenses of 1%. Here are some of the key takeaways for 2019. First, revenues are covering inflationary increases. And then our revenues this year exceeded budget. We had some pleasant surprises. For example, we got a grant to help install a new air conditioner for the feeding ministries. And then, as usual, some expenditures were not expected. For example, we had a large amount of snow, and so our plowing went over budget. And then, as another example, we found some strange items floating around in the All Saints plumbing system. And all these things were not anticipated. But in the end, All Saints Church ended 2019 with a surplus, and I can attest that on December 31st, 2019, the church was in a good, sound financial position. The results that I've presented so far are inaccurate, and you might ask why, and the answer is you. You give All Saints your time and your talent in many different ways. The coffee teams, the altar guild, ushering, singing in the choir, tending the gardens, serving on the committees, helping the food cupboard, the dinner bell, volunteering for the pie festival, volunteering for the resales. I could go on, but you really want this video to end. So I did a back of the envelope calculation. Your volunteering constitutes at least 4,000 hours. And if we compensate you on the New Hampshire minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, that would constitute $30,000 that's not on any of the financial statements. However, this $30,000 is also an underestimate because no income statement, no balance sheet can ever properly reflect your time, your talent, your passion, and your commitment. As I have previously said, our investments are an important source of our financing. The draws that we get from our investment help us avoid an operating deficit. At the end of 2019, the value of all our investments is slightly over $1.2 million. We have 4 different investment managers. So not only are we diversified across asset classes, but we're also diversified across investment management style. New Hampshire Trust holds a majority of our assets, 67%, and this is followed by Muskoma, and then the diocese, and then Wells Fargo.
We had a strong economy in 2019, and as a result, we almost got 15% return on our portfolio. The chart below gives the breakdown of the returns by investment manager. In 2019, New Hampshire Trust is the winner, with over a 16% rate of return, and it is followed by Wells Fargo, and then the Diocese, and then Mascoma. One reason that we at All Saints have had a strong operating and investment results is because of our strong economy. Unemployment rates are at historically low levels. After years of rising, we are experiencing drops in the U.S. poverty rate. The inflation-adjusted worker take-home pay has recently begun to rise, and a result of all of this, our common stock market has climbed threefold since the financial crisis. The U.S. economy has grown even though the European and Asian counterparts have stagnated. This is in part due to the U.S. technical comparative advantage. Despite all these signs, there are ominous clouds of future uncertainty. We will monitor 4 major headwinds. The first major economic headwind is demographics. Birth rates in the U.S. and the developed world are contracting. The shrinking birth rate is accelerating the aging of our society, and this is already putting great strain on our federal, state, and local governments. The Part A Medicare Trust Fund is predicted to go insolvent in 2026, and the U.S. Social Security Trust Fund is expected to be insolvent in 2034. Our record low birth rate is particularly unusual since birth rates usually rise with economic expansions. In the past, we have relied on immigration to make up for anemic birth rates, but since 2016, both authorized and unauthorized immigration has fallen. Both public and private investment retirement systems are underfunded, and this will force many baby boomers to retire into poverty. The future retirement crisis could make the last financial crisis of 2008 and 2009 look like a walk in the park. The next major headwind is climate change. Presently, it is not possible to predict the future economic costs of the loss of land, the expanded droughts, and the devastation brought forth by increasingly severe fire and hurricane events. Trade tensions are another headwind. Trade tensions today are the most severe since the 1930s. While the Phase 1 deal has been signed with China, many tariffs are still in place. These tariffs stifle not only U.S. economic growth, but worldwide economic growth as well. The recent trade tensions can in part be attributed to the rising nationalism not only in the U.S., but across the globe. It might be important to remember how the trade tensions and the nationalisms of the 1930s led to World War II. And finally, there is the threat of the loss of U.S. technical leadership. The technology stocks in the All Saints investment portfolio are the major growth drivers, and they explain most of the nice returns that we have received this year. Yet these technology companies are under threat. Because American schools have failed in training today's youth in technical skills, a recent report from the Silicon Valley Competitiveness and Innovation Project found that our largest tech companies rely more on foreign-born workers than domestic ones. In Silicon Valley, at least 57% of workers in science, tech, engineering, and mathematics are born outside the United States. And today, unfortunately, more and more high-tech foreigners are staying home to pursue opportunities in their own countries, and this should put downward pressure on American economic growth. We, along with our investment managers, will monitor these headwinds and make necessary adjustments. I now will discuss the 2020 budget. For 2020, our projected budget revenues are approximately $259,000, and this is compared to the 2019 budgeted revenues of approximately $240,000. The chart below gives the breakdown on these budgeted totals. The orange line is the breakdown for 2020, and the blue line is the breakdown for 2019. As can be readily seen, parishioner contributions make up the bulk of revenues in both years. Parishioner contributions come in two major forms, either a pledged contribution or an unpledged contribution. In 2020, we are budgeting $155,000 of pledged contributions from you. To date, we have received $149,500. So we're still short by $5,500. The next big source of revenue are the draws that we get from our investments. And I've already discussed our investments. And then the feeding ministries get their own budgeted revenues. If you look under the dioceses category, the fourth one down, you will see that we have a large increase this year. And a bulk of that will finance the new youth coordinator, which is a new initiative for All Saints this year. And then other sources of revenue include the fundraising events such as the Pie Festival and the wreath sales. And finally, we get a small amount from renting our facilities to outsiders. For 2020, we have budgeted expenditures of approximately $259,000. And this can be compared to the 2019 planned budget expenditures of approximately $240,000. The chart below depicts the breakdown of these budgeted totals. Again, the orange line represents the year 2020, and the blue line represents the breakdown for 2019. The employee and office costs are the largest category. And this represents the payroll costs and all the costs of keeping the All Saints office operating, such as the printing, the internet, and the telephone costs. The large bulk of the increase in 2020 will go to finance the new youth coordinator, which is the new youth initiative for All Saints. Program and outreach is the next largest category. And in 2020, we have budgeted $43,000 for this category. And the majority of this, $33,000 of this, will go to pay our fair share payment to the New Hampshire dioceses. Buildings and grounds are the next largest category. And this is used to finance all the things that we need to do to keep the facility operating in good shape, such as the appliance repairs, the heating, the lighting, the water, the snow removal, everything that we need to keep the building in good operating shape. The fourth item, the feeding ministries, are under their own budget, and this is basically to purchase items for the food covered. And then finally, we have other expenses. Now, both on the budgeted revenue and the budget expenditure side, these are all predictions. These are not actual figures. We cannot predict perfectly all the expenditures that we will need to incur in 2020. We don't know how much we'll need for snow removal. We do not know how much we'll need to pay for repairs. So this is our best estimate for year to date as to how much we believe that we will get and as to how much we believe we will spend.
This ends my presentation. 2019 has been a wonderfully prosperous year and has allowed us to do many great things. It is truly a wonderful gift, but it is not the only gift. On a personal note, I have received a great gift from you. When I walked through these doors for the first time in my life, I was lonely. But when I was surrounded by your welcoming spiritual vitality, my loneliness turned into a sense of belonging. You, the members of All Saints, give many gifts. Not only do you facilitate an eloquent Sunday service and a robust coffee hour, you do much more. You constantly renew your spirit through comforting the sick, through feeding the hungry, through giving children with incarcerated parents Christmas cheer. And every day you touch the lives of many people. You do this because you love deeply, because you love genuinely. And this is the greatest of all gifts. Thank you.